Have you ever really thought about how your earliest experiences, the very first things you saw and heard as a baby, actually built the person you are today? It's not just some nice poetic idea. It's literally true. Our brains are physically sculpted by what happens to us. And today, we're going to dive into how this incredible process actually works.
So, to really get this, we're going to start with a genuine medical mystery. Picture this. A little kid has a minor eye issue, maybe a lazy eye. So the doctor puts a patch over their good eye to force the weaker one to get stronger. Makes sense, right? But here's the crazy part. If that patch is left on for too long, during a very specific window of time, that perfectly healthy patched-up eye can become permanently blind. How on earth is that possible?
Well, the condition has a name, amblyopia. But I think a much better name for it is cortical blindness. And that is the crucial clue. See, the problem isn't in the eye at all. The eyeball itself is fine. The problem is in the brain. The brain has literally learned to ignore that eye's input, and figuring out why that happens, well, that started a revolution in neuroscience.
To solve this puzzle, scientists had to figure out the basic rules for how the brain wires itself up. And what they discovered is that the young brain is an incredibly competitive place. It's like a high-stakes battle for neural real estate.
The first huge breakthrough came from a Nobel Prize-winning experiment by two researchers, David Hubel and Torsten Wiesel. They studied the visual system in kittens because, a lot like human babies, their brains are still developing after they're born. And they basically recreated the eye patch scenario by temporarily covering one of a kitten's eyes.
And here's what they found. In a normal kitten's brain, the connections from both eyes get a pretty equal share of space in the visual cortex. But in the kitten with one eye covered, the connections from the open eye didn't just stay the same. Oh no, they went on the attack. They actively expanded and physically took over the brain territory that was supposed to belong to the closed eye. It was a hostile takeover, and the deprived eye's connections just withered away.
So, the main takeaway from this is huge. It wasn't just that the closed eye wasn't being used, it was that there was a competition, and it lost. In fact, they found that if you close both eyes, the connections stay pretty much normal, just a little less sharp. This revealed an amazing principle. The brain is shaped by the balance of activity it gets, and imbalance is way more damaging than no input at all.
This whole idea led to probably the single most important discovery in this story. It's the reason why that eye patch can have such a huge effect on a child, but basically no effect on an adult. It all comes down to timing.
And this brings us to the concept of the critical period. Think of it like a secret window of opportunity in early life. During this window, the brain is super plastic. It's like wet clay, just waiting for specific experiences to mold its permanent wiring. For vision, this period is when the brain listens to the input from the eyes and decides which connections to keep and which to throw away. If you miss that window, the blueprint is pretty much locked in. The biology behind this is just fascinating. So when you're very young, your brain goes on this massive building spree. It creates way more connections, or synapses, than it could ever possibly need. You can see here, synapse density just explodes in early childhood. But then a new phase starts, pruning. Experience comes in and decides which of those billions of connections are useful and which ones are just taking up space.
And the rule for this big cleanup is beautifully simple. You might have heard the phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together. Any connections that are active, that are being used, get stronger and locked into place. And the connections that aren't being used, they get weakened and eventually snipped away. It is literally use it or lose it happening inside your skull.
Now this whole idea, a critical period driven by competition and pruning, it's not just for vision. It's the key that unlocks puzzles in so many other areas, including maybe the most human skill of all, our ability to use language.
We've all seen this, right? Little kids just seem to soak up language like a sponge. It's effortless. Meanwhile, as adults, we can spend years studying a new language and still have trouble with the grammar or the accent. Why is that? Well, it's the exact same use it or lose it window at play.
The data on this is just striking. If you learn a second language between the ages of, say, 3 and 7, you can become perfectly fluent, just like a native speaker. But after age 8 or so, that ability starts to drop off, and it keeps dropping. The brain's language circuits are becoming less plastic as that critical period closes. It's pruned away its ability to hear and make other sounds, to specialize in the language it hears every single day.
And there's a tragic but incredibly powerful real-world case that confirmed how essential this window is. there was a young girl known to science as Jeannie. She was discovered back in 1970 after being raised in horrible isolation, with almost zero exposure to human language. After she was rescued, researchers tried everything to teach her, but she could never truly master grammar. She learned words, sure, but her brain had completely missed the critical window to learn the rules for putting them together. It's a heartbreaking example of what happens when that window is missed.
So let's step back for a second. What's the big picture here? Why does any of this matter to us, long after our own critical periods have closed? Well, understanding this process really changes how you think about everything, about parenting, education, and even our own capacity to learn.
Okay, so let's just recap the big takeaways. First, your brain wasn't born fully formed. It's actively sculpted by your experiences. Your environment isn't just a backdrop, it's a co-creator of who you become. Second, this sculpting is most intense during these critical periods. This is why things like early childhood education are so incredibly important. They're laying a foundation for an entire lifetime. Third, it's a competitive use-it-or-lose-it system. This means that what you choose to pay attention to is literally shaping your brain. And finally, because of all this, those early years have a massive, lasting impact, setting the stage for everything that comes after. And that leaves us with one last fascinating question. If these critical windows of opportunity slam shut as we grow up, is that it? Is the adult brain just set in stone? Or, and this is the really exciting part, could we maybe find the keys to pry those windows back open, to restore the brain's incredible youthful ability to learn and adapt? Figuring that out is one of the biggest frontiers in all of neuroscience today.